briefs for I think the last 10 years or so. But beyond that, she herself has been recognized, a renowned writer in or advancing the art, the skill of legal writing. Has received a number of awards. I believe was the first Ralph Brill Scholar at the University of Chicago. Was the first, excuse me?
Chicago Kent.
Chicago Kent. Was the first non-lawyer to be recognized by the American
Association of Law Schools.
Association of Law Schools. I'm getting it. I tried to memorize it all. So we are honored. She's also a very dear friend of our dean, who I had the pleasure of meeting them both in the office earlier, and Dean Browdick does apologize for not being here. But as you know, that she often has lunch to be able to bring in money, and so at the last minute she was invited to such an opportunity to be able to advance the cause of our law school, and both she and Professor LeClercq understand, but they will be spending time together, I understand, later on this weekend. So without further ado, and listening to me, the Criminal Justice Society and the students of UDC Law School are pleased to welcome you and look forward to hearing what you have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm here for basically 2 or 3 different reasons. One is to tell you how I got involved in prisons and prison reform. Another is to tell you a little story about prison reform. And the third is to encourage you, and I think you're already involved in that because of who and what you already are, to continue the work. Because certainly there's more work to be done, and not one person can do it all. So, 1998, my daughter and I, who was 16, flew to Fort Benning, Georgia to protest against the School of the Americas. The year before, 24 people had protested. The year that we got there, 646 of us showed up and surprised each other to have a peaceful, prayerful protest against a school that was on an army post. It's a legitimate army post with a big gate, and people can go through it all the time, which we did. All of us went through it carrying a cross, a sign of a dead or disappeared in Latin America, deaded or disappeared by somebody who had graduated from the School of the Americas, which is a training ground for military. As we walked across, silently and prayerfully, we had our butts arrested. That was a little bit of a surprise for all 646 of us. We went over Grassy Knoll, and there were the buses. We had our orifices checked, fingerprinted, pictures taken. Quite a surprise for a little lady English teacher and a 16-year-old kid. A bigger surprise was that the people who had been there the year before, the 25 nuns, priests, social workers, Vice President of Gonzaga, were sentenced to 6 months in federal penitentiary. That caught my attention. They started writing letters and postcards, and we started getting them, describing the prison conditions. And I admit to be the most naive person on the planet. I didn't know the difference between a jail and a prison. I could not imagine that what they were saying was true, but they were my little nuns and my little priests, average age of 72. They weren't making it up, and they weren't talking about how their color TV was broken, which is kind of the joke of American media. They were talking about not getting the medicine they needed, diabetes, whatever. They couldn't get their own medicine. They were talking about watching somebody in the next cell who was obviously insane, banging his head against the cell walls and screaming and being taken and put down in the hole because he was disruptive, brought back up 2 weeks later, crazier yet, being put back down in. And I didn't believe it. I took the letters to our different faculty members who teach criminal law, and I said, look at this. Can you believe that? That can't be true. And unfortunately, every one of them said, oh yeah, well that's federal pen. You ought to try it in the Texas jail. It's much worse in Texas prisons. Really? My tax dollars? I couldn't. So I started studying it because I'm an academic, and I thought for the first 2 years I was going to write a law review article on the Prison Litigation Reform Act that would explain what the problem was and how we could fix it. But finally, after about 2 years of studying it, I realized, why would I write a law review article? It would be read, if read at all, by the same colleagues who said, that's nothing, you ought to see the state prison, you know, like they cared. So something had to change, but I couldn't think what it was until I had lunch with a number of my graduates who were clerking on the Court of Criminal Appeals, or the appeals courts, and they said, we love our job, but you'll never believe what we spend most of our time doing. Big boxes of pro se come in all the time, either the habeas or prison conditions. They're horrible. Those people don't know what jurisdiction is. They don't know what a time limitation is. Half of them can't write. Some of them think the prison system has implanted little green men in their heads. It's such a big mixed bag, and we can't do anything about the ones that really have problems because we're so busy doing everything else. So you have on one hand, I think, very legitimate concerns about the prison conditions, and on the other hand, you have a desperate judiciary overwhelmed by very bad grievances, which is what they call writing and complaining, grievances. So here I am. I felt like there was a synergy here. I was in the middle of something. I'd much rather write to the inmates than to the law faculty. And I'm a writing professor, so what can I do? What is my talent? What can I do to help? I can explain to them how to write grievances. And that started this process, which took 10 years, but it's out now. You can buy it on Amazon.com, and that's the only way you can send it into the prison system. You yourself cannot take a book in or send one in. And it's a graphic novel. It's written on the 5th grade reading level. Every page is 5th grade. I think it has an interesting story and characters. And at the very end, it has a workbook. Why this one worked, why this one didn't, what to do if you have medical grievances, what to do if you have life endangerment issues, use of force, all of the religion worksheet, all of the possible ways they might have a problem and want to grieve, but it's a checklist. Do you have this duck in the road? Do you have this one? Because to be able to get outside of the system, you have to have followed the Prison Litigation Reform Act, which of course took me 2 years to understand, and I have a PhD. But the courts hold these inmates to that standard, which is just egregious. And I'm hoping that this book, if it gets into the prison system, can help inmates. So that's my entire spiel on that. I hope that you can think of a way to help me do it, because having to publish it through Amazon means I don't have a publisher. I don't have a publicist. So that's up to you. You know, handing you the seed and having you figure out how to take it. Mr. Tom?
Has it been reviewed in law review?
It just came out about 2 weeks ago. And I don't even know how to get it reviewed in law review. You know, I'm just a little lady English teacher in that regard. So anything that you can help me with, I'll take it and run with it. Any idea that you've got for me?
Have you tried speaking to like the people in charge of the library materials and maybe having this book about the libraries around
The prison library? Yes. The last 3 years I worked on this book, I collaborated with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Sick. Not much justice going on there. And they agreed that finally, when I got the book ready, they're going to put it, a friend of mine has donated the money to be able to send this into each prison library in the state of Texas. And then I went on Indiegogo.com, another adventure I don't recommend for anyone to follow, but I went on a social funding site and I collected $5,000 from people who want this book in the prison libraries. And so that will cover all of the federal prison libraries and a good shot at some libraries in each of the states. So I think that the prison libraries will, within the next month, have these. I hope. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am?
As a teacher for a long time, I had done a lot of like in-cell study stuff, so just sending materials into jailhouse lawyers. They have like informal networks in their own, you know, as
yeah.
in California. That's where I was working. Do you have any funding for that, like for private citizens to send money in? And then how much is your book?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. The book is only $10. Yeah, and it's only $10 because I self-published and I don't get any money out of it. California system is really complicated, but I'm hoping that we can get one into the prison libraries, and then if you know an inmate in the prison system, we can get it into an inmate. And certainly the writ writer circuit would be a great circuit to be able to get into.
And the National Lawyers Guild has a big, we can talk after. We have a chat with the National Lawyers Guild here, and they have a jailhouse lawyer committee.
Oh, great.
You might be able to.
That sounds like a perfect connect, so thank you. Yes.
Two things. I know that a lot of law schools around the country have sort of prisoners' education programs where students go into the prisons and do teach inmates about their rights and about the law. So they may be able to take books in with them.
Do you think they could do? I don't know. Do you think they can take materials down?
I mean, I know they do take them in. I don't know.
Especially at the jail level.
Yeah. And also, there's an organization called Books Through Bars,
Right.
which fulfills orders of people in various institutions when they're looking for a particular type of book that can be able to. They're clearly sending books into this the system, so I may have either ideas or be willing to work with you.
I'm on their listserv, and I really think they're doing a great service. In Austin, I go in on some Sunday nights and help them box up books and try to match the requests, try to read the requests, try to match the requests with what they're looking for. I'd love to be able to do that. I don't think I can fund it, though. I think I'm kind of tapped out on being able to buy a $10 book for every person who needs a book. But I'd love to talk with larger groups that do. Maybe we can get something going, because they've certainly asked me. Different ones of those Books Behind Bars groups have asked me if I can get them some books. So I'd love to do that. Another question that comes to mind is, can I publish it in Spanish? It's especially important in Texas, you know, that string. And there's an interesting answer to that. I'd love to be able to do it. I hope that something like the National Hispanic Bar will fund the translation and then the printing of that, the rewriting of that. But some of the literacy groups are hesitant to do it because they would like to be able to use this book inside as a literary device, to be able to say to somebody who speaks Spanish, what does it say, how would you say it in English? And because they're very interested in the topic, they're hoping that it will help them with their English. So I don't know. What do you think?
Professor Tolman has had an ongoing battle with the Bureau of Prisons about honoring the special education rights and the transition rights of juveniles or persons 18 to 22 who have a federal right to services. And it may very well be that in the context, I'll talk to him afterwards, he wanted to come today, that in the context of those, that this could be one of the texts that was provided and one of the things that was negotiated as part of their special education, asserting their special education rights.
Wouldn't that be fabulous?
It would be, yeah, it would be fabulous.
Okay. Any more distribution ideas, funding ideas?
I think you could get some folks here to do the actual translation. That doesn't take care of the cost of production, which is extensive, but just to have that piece done would be important.
And the person, to create this book, I did the actual research and the dialogue behind it. And then I hired an artist, a graphic artist, who drew. Since the project took so long, it actually took 4 different artists. They're hungry and need real jobs, and so they'd wander off. I'd hire another one and he would wander off. And then you have to hire, see these little bubbles? I don't know what else they're called. You actually have to hire somebody to do the bubbles and the lettering. That's a whole different professional. And so I've had 3 of those bubblers. So what, I'm not sure what I think he calls himself a professional letterer, however. So really that's where the money would go. I think I could get somebody to translate it into Spanish. I think that's a nice gift from somebody. But we'd need money to pay that guy because he also doesn't have a day job. Yeah.
On the Spanish, Is the grievance procedure the same in federal detention centers, like immigration detention centers?
They have no rights.
Okay.
You know, I asked that question. It was an amazing answer. They have no rights. Too bad. The Texas juvenile justice system, which is under unbelievable fire. They've had so many scandals and problems and closed 3 centers. And when they close the centers, they put the youths in the adult jail because they couldn't think of what else to do. But the juvenile justice system is thinking about trying to do something like this for their students, because they have no right. Yeah. Yes, sir?
This may not be the most economically feasible alternative, and it might create a few issues with like your proprietor rights in the material. Have you considered creating a digital copy?
Well, they can't have them in the prison, so that doesn't do me any good. I can have it digitalized, although it takes a lot of memory to do this. But then you, as the father, would have it. But you couldn't send it to your son. They don't have capability there. I know.
You know, a quick way to get it out quickly to the masses.
Right. I wouldn't. You know, I have no interest in keeping it to myself, but it's just that I'm trying to get it inside, and I don't really know how else to do that.
You could print it and send it 20 pages at a time.
In some places.
Yeah.
You can't in Texas, but
Okay.
yeah. So I'd like to tell you the story of my poster boy, if that's okay. Do we have time to hear one story? So here's the poster boy. Mr. Manaman, who is living in Llano, Texas, where he probably shouldn't have been living, decided to make a second living by either making and selling meth, which he probably shouldn't have done that either, because he got caught. He was put in the Llano jail. Mr. Manaman was born with 1 foot shorter than the other, about 2 inches shorter, and he had to wear a prosthesis. But when he got to the jail, they took away his boots, put him in shuffle shoes. So he walked plump, plump, and they got him a job back in the kitchen. Blump, 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 blump. Thank you. And he said, I really need my boot. Yeah, we'll get it to you tomorrow. Next day, I really need my boot. Look, my leg is starting to get red. Yeah. Weeks went by, actually months went by. His leg was so swollen, his foot was so swollen that a physician's assistant was asked to come in and look at it. The physician's assistant said, you've got to get him to the hospital. This is getting infected. Nothing happened. About 2 weeks later, his leg was swollen with streaks in his leg. And Mr. Manaman asked the jailer to please get him to the hospital. And the jailer said, it's Friday. If it's like that on Monday, I'll make an appointment, get you to the hospital. Over the weekend, his leg burst. They took him to the hospital where they amputated Mr. Manaman's leg. Mr. Manaman then finally got transferred over to a prison where he started writing, as you can imagine, some complaints and filing them before the court saying, I seem to be missing a leg, and it's your fault. The court, he won, and the reason I know about him at all, he won the first 2 appeals he had as it went up the system, and they kept protesting his win. Right before it went before the 5th Circuit, we were able to get him a set of lawyers who helped him take his case into court. And this is the thing I want you guys to remember the most, please, out of everything else. The court slam dunked him, take nothing. And they said, you didn't follow the rules of the jail. You didn't exhaust your administrative remedies. Now, I have to tell you this, as an English teacher, it took me forever to figure out what exhaust your administrative remedies meant. All I could do after a while was say, this is exhausting, but I don't know if it's exhausted. He didn't write his complaint. He's showing him his leg. They have a report from the physician, but that didn't exhaust the administrative remedies because he didn't write the grievance. And he got slammed dunked, even with 2 lawyers trying to help him in the 5th Circuit. So that's the tragedy of it, isn't it? It's not that he wants a color TV. It's that they took his leg, and he gets no compensation because he didn't write the grievance the way he was supposed to. Each jail has a process that has to be followed. They just don't tell you about it often. Each prison has a process that has to be followed. And it doesn't matter if it's state, it doesn't matter if it's federal. It's governed by the Prison Litigation Reform Act, and that act says you have to follow the rules of your jail or your prison. I was just talking to a man last week in Houston who spent 27 years in prison for embezzlement. He was a CPA. He said when he was first arrested, he was so terrified. He'd been caught. He was going to lose his wife. He was going to lose his CPA license. They grabbed him and put him into a room and handed him some papers and said, read this. These are your rights in the jail as you're going in. And that they were these tattered yellow pieces of paper. The staple had actually come off of it. The words had been smeared so that he couldn't even read it. He said he was so terrified he didn't even read it. He was just shaking. He couldn't even read it. And he never saw it again. That was their attempt to educate him on what his rights would be in the jail and prison system, and that was it. So he had no idea for all those years how to write a grievance, how to get it through the system. Sometimes the writ writers will help, but they also tend to go toward legalese, bring in cases, things that are unnecessary and actually confuse the issue. And they also like them to attach their evidence, which gets torn off and thrown away, because they're asked not to attach evidence.
I was just wondering, when someone's entered into the prison system, is there any kind of law or statute that says that the officials have to explain what their rights are? I mean, I know you were saying that they're handed a handbook, but it probably has a lot of legalese, so they don't understand. Does someone explain, here are your rights, and here's, if you have a grievance, this is the way to go about it?
That isn't covered, I don't think, under the Prison Litigation Reform Act. I believe it's covered just within each state or within, like, the federal system. But what did they do to inform you, right? Right. Like this man, Mr. Manaman, argued in both of his filings that they told him he didn't have to write it. Oh, in this jail, you don't have to write it down. Just tell me, it's good, you know, we'll fix it. Well, the Fifth Circuit said that's not how it works. So they nabbed him, even though the jail had told him their system was different. So I think it's a real problem. I'd love to be able to talk to people who are going to be wardens, people who, you know, they train the guard staff. I'd love to be in that education process. I'm sure they're just dying to invite me. But I think it would be good for everyone. So when I do talk to the wardens, and I spent 3 years with the system, when I talk to them and see the crap they have to dig through, read the nonsense they get so much of the time, I kind of see where they're jaundiced, where they get jaded and just don't believe what these guys have to say, because they're not always credible, and some of them do have little green men in their heads, I think. Yes, sir?
You know, what does the system have to gain from not having people informed?
Oh, they don't have to make changes. You see, if you have a grievance, let's say you were saying, and this has happened, a friend of mine was in prison and this happened now. He's watching in the food processing, they're supposed to divide up hazardous material from paper and whatnot. They don't. They put it together. So he filed a grievance. They can turn it down and it doesn't cost them anything, doesn't take their time. But if they agree, then they have to do something about it. So it's really to their benefit not to. But I will say this in their favor. A lot of times they'll turn down your grievance. They'll say, you know, forget about it, and swoop around behind and take care of the problem. But they don't want you to know that you succeeded with the grievance. It's part of the mind game philosophy that they have to maintain control in the prisons.
So it's about maintaining control over, obviously it's about maintaining control over prisoners and stuff like that. I mean, I was just kind of interested because there's a lot to lose from not having people informed and little to gain from creating a system where people are going to, right, who are going to be rehabilitated, and that's all part of the process.
That doesn't seem to be the goal of prison law anymore. I think that was probably true up in the 30s or 40s when we talked about rehabilitation. But that hasn't been true in the entire prison system in years. Look at the Rockefeller drug laws, right? Nobody was trying to rehabilitate people who took drugs. They were there to punish them. And you don't want the color TV working. You want to punish them. Mm. Yeah. It's been a huge shift in the philosophy behind prisons. Now, however, we're living in a wonderful time. Now, things may change, not because people have a different heart, but because of economics. They're estimating that 35% of the people in the Texas prison system are there on drug-related charges. 35%. What if they had been diverted into drug rehabilitation? What if 10% of them were hopeless and had to go to prison, but 25% of them were not in the prison system? Think of the freeing up of beds, medical care, the ability of those men to actually get somebody's attention if they are innocent or whatever. That would be great to be able to free up 25%, but that's not what our drug laws say. So this may change because of the economics of how much it's costing. $27,000 a year to keep somebody in prison, to divert him into a drug program is $6,000, and to get him some kind of technical information, education, or whatever, another, let's say, $5,000. It makes economic sense to start closing down these beds, but that's not what's happening because we have a big industrial system. In Texas, somebody wrote a book some years ago, an inmate, really bad book, but it was called the largest hotel chain in Texas, and the hotel was our prison system. What is the largest education system, the largest school district in the state of Texas? Wyndham School District covers all of the prisons. Not well, and with no money, and everybody's always on lockdown, so they can't go into the classes, but nevertheless, it's the largest school district in Texas. Who supplies steel, concrete? It's an amazing industrial complex. Yes, ma'am.
I have two suggestions, and because I just thought about them, I don't know how feasible they are. But in terms of like publicity, have you tried to contact like a representative from Illinois or someone in the House of Representatives, someone on like judiciary committees to review these types of issues like prison systems, and then you could be a panelist on the committee and have your book there and get more nationwide publicity in terms of it?
I don't know those people. I'd love to do it.
Well, I used to work for the Senate Judiciary Committee, so I can give you the names of the criminal justice people and put you in touch with them, see if that's something that they're interested in doing. And then for financing, I don't know if you've ever heard of Kickstarter. I don't know very much about it, but I know that that's how some people who like have an idea and want to open a restaurant or want to finance something, they open it up via social media and get investors from all over the place who are interested in being a part of it. So I think that could be a good way, but I don't know much about Kickstarter. So.
Well, I tried Kickstarter and they don't do causes.
Oh.
They think I'm a cause. I said, but you have a book, Mary and Jane Have a Baby. Isn't that a cause? No, that's not a cause. But I did use Indiegogo for the money that I did get that allows me to send them into the prison libraries. That was the most exhausting job I've ever had. I used to say that teaching the 1 year I taught in the public schools was the most exhausting job. When you teach 7 classes a day and then have to go home and grade English papers, you're a walking zombie. That was so tiring, but Indiegogo took more of my time than that. My husband kept saying, if you will stop, I'll give you the money. Come back, have dinner with me. No, I have to come back. It's exhausting. Sir?
Professor, thank you for coming today. What kind of opposition do you anticipate or have you actually faced in trying to disseminate?
Good question. When I first started the project, I tried to talk to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and with some of the legislators. And they just really are not interested in helping inmates grieve. They don't want it because it clogs up their system already. And they say, if you don't think they can grieve, trust me, that's all they do all day long. But, so there's that pushback. As I got closer, I was able to pull some strings, which you shouldn't have to do as a citizen. You should have access because you're a citizen, but I pulled some strings and I was able to go around all of the underlings of the prison system and get the former head of the whole system to tell the current head of the whole system to get off her rear end, meet with me, and once she met with me, It was just this domino effect. All the doors of the entire system opened. I talked to all the people who read Grievances, who wrote the Grievances, who were the guards. It was amazing. That finally I was able to get some help. They were actually very helpful in the drafts. They were pointing out things that probably don't happen in prisons, or you might not want to, you know, do that. And they were very helpful. They were never censoring me, but they actually did help me because I'm not an inmate. So they knew a lot more than I did, and I'm very grateful that they helped me with that. Individual jails and prison officials have told me they hope they never see this book. But I told them they're going to see the book and that it will help their workload. If the prisoners actually follow those checklists at the back, they're not going to be writing frivolous ones. And they're not going to be writing malicious ones, which is the other problem. Some of the ones that I read in the prison systems are horrible. The inmates are really angry with the guard, and they went to get back at him. And this is how they do it. They write this horrible grievance about things that may or may not have happened. But with these checklists, they wouldn't have anything to check, right? They don't have any evidence. They don't have any witnesses. And so it should cut down on unnecessary grievances. And I would think they should be coming up on bended knee, kissing my hand, and saying, thank you, but it hasn't happened yet. Might, I'm waiting. Might, yes.
Right now you have foundations very concerned about what they call the school-to-prison pipeline. And I met last week with Congressman Allison Hastings. I think this is something the Congressional Black Caucus would be interested in. Shelley probably has contacts with him, I do. And in the alternative, I think there are some foundations that if you've got I'm assuming somewhere there's a 501c3 that you're linked to. But if not, I'm simply going to say I do have one that is very concerned about the racial disparity issues. And this is exactly the kind of thing that it's almost safe for a foundation to invest money into. And I just think writing a grant proposal to get it, it's another art form, but this is exactly the kind of thing that they would invest in.
I would think if you took this book into the public schools and asked them to read, I mean, it's 64 pages of comic book, right? It's not hard to read. But then ask them how much they felt like going out and committing a crime tomorrow so that they too could write a grievance. I think it would have a certain effect, because some of the things in this book are pretty grim. And the first 4 inmates who responded, they got the book and they wrote me through a prison radio show that I've been on. They were very surprised at how harsh I was with them. You know, that I said, you don't write one of these for retaliation. Get out of here. You don't have the ducks, don't, get in the water. And so they were really surprised. They were very happy with the information, and they were able to use it, and it did educate. But they were surprised that it wasn't all bleeding heart. So I would think it would be kind of fun to have it in the public schools.
Unfortunately, I've had the pleasure of spending my fair share of time on the government side. And I think one of the challenges you may face is the fact that they've probably never read the book. So they've seen the cover, they've seen what it's about, and the ones who have to make the decisions about it don't actually see the value that you're talking about, that it actually gets to sifting through the bad stuff and actually helping them do good work. It's an unfortunate reality, but they probably haven't even read it. They just see the cover and think it's one of the excuse the pun, one of those lefty, things just to try to make prisoners' lives better. But one of the things I'm curious about, have you considered, and while we would love to do it here or in some way at this university, we're just happy to have the Criminal Justice Society and the Innocence Project to be able to be interested in this topic. But I know that some law schools have clinics that work with prisoners and work in either their jail or their prison. Have you considered reaching out to some of those law schools and some of those clinics to see if they could introduce the book into some of those law schools?
I know of only 3 law schools that have prison law, okay. And I haven't contacted them yet. Okay. But they're certainly on my list. If you know more about things like that, I'd love to hear about it. That would be good. More. So what can you do? You've given me ideas. I have some flyers here in case you belong to another club or a church or a synagogue that has a need for a project, Girl Scout troop, whatever. You could let them know about the book. They may, with any luck, you don't know anybody in jail or prison. But since 1 in 100 Americans is in jail or prison system, in Texas it's 1 in 54, which is pretty shocking. If you don't, that means that somebody else knows too, and would probably need this information.
What would you, in the ideal world, you're at a public interest law school, and if you had the magic wand, what would you say that we could do to not only help the cause of the book, but to be able to help prisoners with the grievance process, legitimate grievance process? What could we do as a public interest law school to make that process more effective, more efficient, and more equitable?
Wow.
Just pretend you knew the dean at such a school.
And we're spending the day with her tomorrow.
What comes to your mind? Because you know the realities of your schedule and your finances and your energy. What comes to mind?
Well, I would think we're definitely the ones that can help with the social media stuff, the working, like our first year students have a community service requirement of 40 hours for their first year. So, you know, they can work with you and work with other people. They can man the Indiegogo or whatever it's called.
I'm done with that one.
or another one, you know, I think that.
Right here, probably we just went out and made a circle right here. You're going to find children whose parents are incarcerated. And that's one of a bigger need. A friend of mine went into the El Paso School District and said she would like to work specifically with the children of incarcerated. And the school district said, oh, we don't have any of those children. No, it's amazing. Great, lucky you. But that one and that one and that one, they're not going to self-identify PC prisoner's kid. But, you know, you could help there. Certainly could help me. You're already so busy. I'm not really sure what all you could do. Push. The DC jail is rather infamous. You could push, ask them what their grievance policy is. You'd like to see it. You know, how do the people being processed in 24 hours a day into that loud, noisy place, where do they get the information? What do they do with it? How many grievances are filed in that jail? Per week, per year, whatever. Jeff?
Well, one approach could be legislative. I mean, we have a pretty liberal council, and I don't think anybody would be willing to argue that prisoners should not know their rights and should not have access to comprehensible information on how to file a grievance. It would be tough for them to take that kind of stand. So, writing or agitating for legislation along these lines could be another approach.
I'm frankly just asking if they have a grievance process. They're supposed to. May I see it? It's not written, or it's there. How do the inmates see it? How is it disseminated? Because in the jail, people are coming and going, and it's very hard to get that information to them. But it's also the jails generally across the United States that are the hellholes, where we really need to look. We really need to pay attention.
There's also the newly reestablished Corrections Information Council, whose job it is to visit all of the different prisons where DC residents are imprisoned across the country.
Really?
Yep, they were just like reestablished this year, and we actually had the chairperson of the Corrections Information Council at a panel at the school this week, and I think that that would be a good person for you to know too. And when they go to visit the jails or the prisons, that maybe they could bring some of your books as well.
And they should ask that question too. You know, what is your grievance policy? Can I see it?
Yeah, they review like the functioning and if the prisons are operating like as they're supposed to under the standards of the Bureau of Prisons and et cetera.
It's great. I'd love to get the name of that person.
Are the policies,
Yes.
the grievance policies the same at the jail, the state, and the federal level?
Well, they're overseen by that federal act, but each jail and each prison system can determine its own. For instance, in Texas, you have to talk directly to the person involved, and you have to have 2 written grievances. I looked at a statute the other day from, I think it's Idaho, and in a jail, they have a 6-step process.
So how would this book help people, you know?
Because it says follow your system's rules. At the beginning, it says these rules are called in the federal system BP, B2. You know, here I'm using step 1 and 2. Find out what the nomenclature is for your system. I didn't use that word. Your system, and use those steps because you have to follow the steps of that system. Yeah. And they are different. I couldn't believe a person in jail has to go through 6 steps before being able to file a grievance in a court. And then you're either dead or really exhausted, right? Yeah. Good question.
We have the Forms Homecomers Academy, and they provide offices, an outreach office for the law school clinic. And since their job and what they're trying to do is to be, in effect, a nationwide alumni organization, I think that they could do a job with dissemination. And we talked to them before we came, and they're very interested in learning about this and being a dissemination vehicle. I just think that you almost need to be overseeing or putting in motion some mechanisms and have staff so who are in fact getting the word out and disseminating it. Because when I've gone around to elementary schools here and they've asked how many of you have a relative in prison, it's some 50% of them.
It's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is just a thought out of the blue, but do you blog because you are a writer? And if you blog, this feels like one of those things where you could blog your own story. You have a story here. You are on a journey. These are very powerful, just little anecdotes that you have just shared. Your own personal story would then become the vehicle for sharing the larger stories, but also for disseminating people's thinking about this and building up a head of steam. That's just a thought.
That's why you need kids. I have a blog spot, and I think I have looked at it every day. I've blogged on it, but nobody knows it's there. You know, it's really hard to self-generate a blog. So last week I was at the National Prisoner Families Conference, and I told them about the blog. And so maybe I'm hoping it starts.
To grow, right.
Yeah, I hope. But
So,
I didn't think about personal experiences.
Yeah, well, I think getting some advice from some young people about how to make that blog appealing, it's probably a good idea. We have a young person who's just joined our organization, and our Facebook was sort of going along like this. After a week, it's like that.
Really?
The graph has just gone up because she knows how to speak that language, and we don't. We're not of that generation. But it's powerful. It does reach out.
I'm ready.
So, yeah, so you need some
I need
volunteers.
some help.
Yes, on that front.
Actually, it took me 6 days, all day long, typing in the addresses of all the Indiegogo donors so that I could send them their own copy of the book. It took me 6 days just to type that out. Yeah. But I did it. I did it. I now come to federal prisons. I'll do it when I get home. But it would be useful if you have ideas about how to make prisongrievances.blogspot.com more available. I'm ready to hear it. You can go on and like it or whatever people do to them. I'm not really sure. Yeah. I know you guys want some pizza. Have you gotten pizza? My wish would be that we would take the prison system, the huge prison complex that we have, and narrow it down to the people who need to be there. The really bad people in our society that we don't want on our streets tonight as we go to bed. And that we take all of the rest of them and then to divert them where they need to go. That we give them some kind of substance abuse help, whatever it is, so that they can be functioning citizens, so that they can be the parents to all those kids that don't have parents right now. That they'll have jobs and pay taxes so that we can get our roads fixed by their contribution. I don't think all of them were born saying, I think I'll go be a criminal and go to prison for 32 years. That we can reduce the sentencing. In Texas, you get 20 years for whatever, jaywalking, I don't know. 20 years, a jury in Texas thinks 20 years is a medium. And that anything lower than that is soft on crime. So, by the time the people get out, they don't have a family. I get all of these sad jail mail letters. Dear Dr. LeClercq, my mama died at Christmas. I've been here since I was 16. Nobody else writes to me or knows my name. Will you write to me? What do you mean you've been in prison since you were 16 and you're now 35 years old and your mama died, right? Get those sentences to something realistic. Get rehab going. Cut down on the number of people in the pipeline. And I think then we can turn to prison grievances and say, here's how you write a grievance.
Well, I think that there's a whole audience out there that if they knew about this, for instance, I've been on the board of an organization called the Youth Advocate Program. It deals with 10,000 kids a year who have been deep in the system but have been diverted, given wraparound services in about 16 states. If this was available on the internet, all of them could be seeing that because they're outside now, and they could maybe be buying copies or telling people in the prison. So I think it is a matter of sort of use of the social media. Are you precluded by your publication terms from scanning those in so that those could be so that people could watch it as a slideshow?
No.
Because I just think that would take it to a whole different level of distribution. That would be, and the teachers might use it as a 5th grade reading assignment. I mean, I just think that
grim assignment.
It may be grim, but it's exactly the kind of thing.
Can you imagine a mommy saying, "Hi Sally, what did you do today?" We practiced writing prison grievances to prepare us for tomorrow.
Well, you have a lot of folks who I think would want to use it as reading assignments for teenagers. You know, there are all kinds of teenage programs for kids who have gotten into trouble, intervention programs. I just think that
how can I get all of these good ideas sent to me? You don't have a marker for a blackboard.
It should be right at the corner, right at the desk, end of the desk, the green one.
Okay, so one way you can do it . Email me and say, remember, I was going to give you the name of the legislator who, or you can go on to prisongrievances.blogspot.com, and you can respond to one of the articles I put in there, why not? And say, oh, by the way, you know, check on so-and-so. I have some. I brought a few books. If anybody's interested in one, I don't make any money off them. They're $10 if you want to buy one. If you want to give $10 to send one into the prison system, that's swell. If you want to take a brochure, a pamphlet like this, what am I really saying, flyer, and know somebody that you want to give it to or a group, that's fine too. Okay. Thank you for staying with me through lunch, for all of the suggestions, for making me feel like this was a legitimate project that actually is needed. Sometimes when you're sitting by yourself in Austin, Texas, you don't know, right? So thank you. And thank you.